Today we're talking about the Yu-Gi-Oh manga, again, about a duel that I have mixed feelings about, and the story around it, obviously. This is a weird one. This duel is a weird one, and I'm probably not going to spend much time talking about the specifics of the duel, like the turn-by-turn, play-by-play. But I am going to kind of use a jumping-off point to talk about how putting this game in this scenario, in this manga, where it's like got like holographic stuff assisting it, allowed for Takahashi to be creative with it in ways that never would have made sense if it was just people holding pieces of paper. And like, yeah, you need to add some kind of visual element to it because this is a manga, it's a visual medium, but it could have just been like, you know, the imaginings of the players or something, right? And only used mechanics that he created for the physical card game, without the assistance of the technology that he created for his story, but creating the technology to assist with playing the game in his story allows him so many more options that he just wouldn't have reasonably had otherwise. And I think that's what really shines through best in this duel in terms of mechanics. There's some good character work here too. In particular, the stuff leading up to the duel is good character work, because it turns out our heroes didn't consider that they'd basically be roughing it on this island. They thought there would be like a resort or a hotel or something where they would get to stay and they'd be provided for, and the tournament stuff would just happen in like a hall or something, right? So now they're stuck here overnight with no food. Like this is still the same problem that arose earlier in the day when they got fish from, oh God, what's his name? What's his name in the Japanese? Mako Tsunami. God, I usually I can remember his name, but I can't remember anybody else's. Because I did grow up watching the dub, right? Yeah, it doesn't matter. So they don't have any food again, and even sleeping can be difficult, and they don't have a shower for those who need one. But thankfully, Mai is still around, and she did anticipate that this was going to be sort of a camping type situation, or at least that it might be. And I know it's weird after what just happened in the last review to say luckily Mai is still around, but this is when we get the softer side of Mai, because she is a duelist professionally. Some of what we've been seeing of her so far has been the facade that she puts on when she's doing her job. And so she shows up, she declares a truce with these guys, and while she doesn't like immediately gel with them, she's still being bossy, and she's treating the guys as sus, but being nicer to Anzu. Her personality is very different. She's way more amicable here. And you get the sense that part of the reason why she's here talking to them and helping them is because she wants to understand them better, because they have gotten under her skin a little bit in that good way that has kept her thinking about Jinochi's riddle. But she's still here, and she's still being nice to them. She has one of those portable shower contraptions that she's able to set up for Anzu to use, and she has food that they can cook. It looked like some kind of instant curry or something. It looked pretty freaking good. And a tent that she's able to share with Anzu so that Anzu has a place to sleep away from all the guys, which isn't a thing that would have bothered Anzu, but it's still a nice thought. And even more so, even though Yugi is a rival and she anticipates having to fight him and really looks forward to it because of how intimidating an opponent he is, she recognizes that Anzu and Yugi have a thing for each other and even sets them up. And they have a little moment in this chapter. It's really cute. And it's one that we definitely should have gotten in the anime, and maybe we did in the Japanese version and they just removed it for some reason. But we really should have gotten it in the anime. But we couldn't because, and I'm going to talk about this again when we get to that point in the manga, that this happened in the anime, probably. I have a note to do it. It depends on what the review actually ends up being about in the moment. But let's talk about it for a second here. In the manga, the gang acknowledged the other Yugi way back at the end of Death Tea. I talked about this in my reviews of Death Tea. I can't remember the specific chapter, but it was relatively late in Death Tea, in the Death Tea arc, which was very loosely adapted, the end of it anyway, into the very first episode of this anime adaptation. But because it was just one episode, they didn't have time to do everything they needed to do there. And I guess this is something they thought was too important to stick in like a flashback or something, like Yugi's backstory with Jinochi. in the anime, which was just a quick flashback. But since it happened back before the stuff that the anime was starting to adapt, in the anime, even though there's definitely stuff that they keep in from the manga where it seems like these guys are aware of the existence of the other Yugi, they can't acknowledge the other Yugi directly because they don't acknowledge him for the first time until later, until after Yugi's next duel with Kaiba. And so that's why I'm assuming that this scene isn't in the Japanese version of the anime either. But there's a scene here in the manga where Mai kind of manipulates Yugi and Anzu to the same place under the night sky and gets them talking. And Yugi, who definitely has a thing for Anzu, kind of apologizes to her and says that she really wants the other Yugi here for this. But she assures him she has feelings for him too. Like, she has feelings for both of them. And this was still back when they thought Yugi and the other Yugi were literally just two sides of the same person. So later, when we learn more of the truth of who the other Yugi is, this gets a little weirder. But for right now, it's really sweet. She has feelings for both of them. He doesn't need to switch with the other Yugi. She's happy to be there with just him. Kind of a, you're not worse than this other guy, Yugi, please stay with me. And they have a little romantic moment, and it's very sweet. And it just so happens, though, that during this romantic moment, Mai gets kidnapped by a player killer. Like, not literally, he's not literally going around killing people. He can, but that's not literally what he's doing. He's just a guy hired by Industrial Illusions to knock people out of the tournament and keep things going at a brisk pace. And also to kind of curate who actually makes it into the castle, I would imagine. Except that he says that he can beat Yugi. So I guess if anyone, and I think they address this later too, anyone who's working for Pegasus, if they beat Yugi, it's also like Pegasus beat Yugi. I wouldn't consider it that if I were the Big Five, but you know, the Big Five are idiots. So it makes sense. And it's not like Anzu still being there in the tent with her would have actually done anything to help. They just both would have gotten kidnapped, but you know, still. It's a whole thing. And it's a cute little scene. And what I love most about it is that riddle that Jinochi said to Mai, that good old riddle. Mai was obsessing over it so much in the last review. And while she's talking to Anzu here, not only do we get more insight into her character, she actually admits the real reason why she's here participating in this. She goes a little bit into how she lost her faith in people. She was exposed to only greedy people for such a long time, working in a casino. And she's here because she wants to try to find her duelist pride again and become a more optimistic person again, like she used to be. That's her real goal here. And that's why, and she hasn't quite realized it yet, but that's why these people appeal to her so much. Because she asks Anzu, like she's noticed that she's just kind of become part of this group. They're just cool with her being here, and she doesn't understand why. So she asks Anzu why these people are just so cool with each other. And she gets the answer to the riddle. And she hasn't really realized yet, and it's just an answer. There are multiple answers to the riddle, obviously. But Anzu says it's because they're friends. And it's just such a perfect moment that encapsulates the fact that Mai is on a journey of her own here. It's mostly happening in the background right now. But Mai has been taken by this guy, and his job is to knock people out of the tournament, so he's quite good. He has a strategy that she isn't really prepared for, and he eliminates her from the tournament. She had 8 star chips of the 10 that she needed, but now she's eliminated. But, thankfully, Yugi shows up in time, and Yugi, being a prime target, is able to hold this guy's attention, and he swears that he'll get them back. But he only has 6 star chips. He can't bet his 6 star chips against 8, so once again, he has to bet something more than just his star chips, and this time, he does actually bet his life. He will be hung by a noose if he loses this duel. And you could kind of argue that the guy wouldn't have gone through with this. His name's, I think they just call him Darkness. He's called Panic in the dub, but I think they just call him Darkness. I don't really care, because Yugi's side of this conflict is way more interesting than his opponent's, so it doesn't really matter. But, like, You could argue, based on this guy's character and what you learn about him throughout the coming duel, that he wouldn't have gone through with this, that this was just a pure intimidation tactic. But man, it's still... Yugi's got steel balls. Well, the other Yugi's got steel balls, man. Like he fights this battle with a noose around his neck the entire goddamn time, and it's his opponent who's afraid. Because this guy fights very defensively. He plays a card called the Castle of Dark Illusions, which casts Yami, the Darkness Field spell, over his side of the field. And this is where we get into those mechanics I was talking about that come from the technological assist of the holographic battle box. Normally this would just be a regular field power bonus. It's implied anyway, that normally this would just be a regular field power bonus. But because of the technological assist that the holograms provide, it literally makes his side of the field dark. So he can play monsters face up in attack mode, but his opponent can't see what they are. It's very much like how the ocean worked back during that ocean duel. And he does this, he continues to play monsters, and because Yugi doesn't know which monster is which, he doesn't feel confident enough in attacking. But he notices right away that his opponent isn't really attacking him either. He's keeping his monsters in the darkness to keep their appearance and their stats hidden. So Yugi immediately pegs this huge guy. This guy is huge too, by the way. That's worth keeping in mind here too. He's massive. But Yugi immediately pegs him as someone who has built himself up and built this facade for himself and created this strategy, all to intimidate people, because he's really a coward. And the way he plays, hiding in the darkness, he hides behind a force field projected down from the castle. He's a coward. He doesn't feel able to do anything until he's sure that he's going to succeed without being harmed. And so Yugi, in what is an absolutely ridiculous play that is, again, only made possible by the technological assist of these hologram boxes, something that Yugi would have had to intuit for himself since it's not in the actual rules of the game. Yugi is able to use this strategy against him, causing his opponent, tricking his opponent, intimidating his opponent into trapping all of his monsters to be destroyed at once, obliterating this guy's life points all at the same time. When Yugi himself, through his almost reckless push, he's down to only 300. It would have been child's play to finish him off. If he had been wrong about this guy's personality, he would have lost this game, but he's not. He wins all at once, and it's pretty spectacular, even if it is kind of dumb. The way Little Karibo explains it in his Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged is probably the funniest way of looking at this. It just sums up why it's ridiculous so well.
With my catapult turtle, I can launch my dragon champion toward your castle, shattering its flotation ring, thereby causing it to collapse on top of your monsters.
This card game is a load of bollocks.
But especially in the manga version, where Yugi doesn't seem like he's on the back foot the entire time, and he even calls his shot. He says 5 turns and you lose. Right? He's that confident, and he even pulls it off. Even though the climax of this duel is ridiculous, it still feels super satisfying. And you really get an insight into just how skilled Mai actually is without all of her tricks and stuff, because she's able to see what Yugi is doing immediately. And she doesn't feel resentful either that she didn't think of it. She just acknowledges that this is part of his skill. And in the end, because this guy made this a shadow game, by putting the noose around Yugi's neck, Yugi is able to inflict upon him an illusion of the death and darkness that he is clearly afraid of, because he is so quick to intimidate others with it. And it's implied that he might have died. I don't think he did, because Mai and Anzu are standing in the background of the panel while Yugi's looking back at this guy, and they're smiling. If the guy had just died, I would expect them to be kind of freaked out, and they're not. So I think the guy's just going to be shaken up for a while, and Yugi gets Mai's star chips back. And these are fun chapters. The duel itself, there are some elements in here that are just there's stuff that'll be heavily reworked later, even the stuff that isn't clearly an aspect of the holographic field. But it's still clever, and it shows Yugi being clever with more than just cards, assessing this guy's personality and using it against him. It's the kind of thing that we haven't really seen Yugi do since those earlier chapters of the manga, when he was dealing with people more personally through other games that weren't as complex as this one. And the stuff with Mai at the beginning was great. Mai ends up being friends with this group, and this is the first step in that happening, and it makes it super believable, and she gels well with them. I like her with them. Like, there's not much to this one otherwise. Like, I guess we know how serious Pegasus is about this tournament now, that he's sending out these hired goons to knock people out of it and maybe even hurt people in the process. But we knew he was serious about this already. This doesn't really change much. It just introduces us to a new class of player, I guess, who can be recurring villains later. Like this player killer group, we bump into them again later. But for the most part, it's just a simple and effective duel with some good character work in it. And I like it a lot for that, even if it is goofy otherwise. Either way, though, guys, if you have read these chapters of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga, these are chapters 21 through 24. What do you think of them? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, you might as well like the video, share it with anyone else who you think would enjoy my content, subscribe if you haven't. You can also check out links to my various social medias, as well as the many ways you can help out the channel. Those will be in the video description, but either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.